Guys, what is up? Swim here for Evil Geniuses, and today we are gonna be going through how to get to Lord of White Spire in this game. It's actually not as hard or intimidating of a process as it might seem. I'm gonna talk a little bit about climbing strategies in general, and basically the one build you're gonna need in your arsenal to get you to Lord. This is a meta build that is going to basically be winning you almost every single game if you play it properly. It's the most consistent way in the entire game to play right now, and it's also a fantastic time to be trying to get to Lord. With the big patch coming up in the next week or so, this is the time where a lot of players are going to be kind of taking breaks from the game. A lot of the top Lord players in particular, maybe they'll just wait it out for the big update. But when that happens, the meta is going to shift. Everything's going to be very different. If you want to get Lord in Season 1 or Season 0, I guess actually, now is definitely your best chance. Okay, before I start talking about the specific build, let's talk about the concept of tightening your range to climb. So your range in any video game is the basically amount of strategies that you're willing to play. It's a term that originated from poker, and basically the idea in Underlords is that your range is the amount of comps that you're willing to basically play into, right? So the general strategy with Underlords is that you want to start a game, have in your mind a range of 2 or 3 comps. Let's say I start a game and my range is let's say hunters or mages, right? So I have a range of 2, and these are the 2 comps I'm thinking about going. So for the first 10 rounds of the game, if I see a lot of drow rangers, wind runners, beastmasters, I'm thinking more so hunters, and if I see more crystal maidens, lenas, pucks, razors, I'm thinking more mages, right? It's that's my range. I know these are the 2 comps I'm comfortable playing. And let's go ahead and just decide which one of these 2 it's going to be based on these units, and then the comp is going to kind of construct itself. I know the comp I want to end up in, so I'm not going to let myself stray too far from that once I am locked in and I know what I'm going to do, right? Now, a lot of people make the mistake of having too wide of a range if they're going to climb, and I think at the end of the day, the most important thing to understand is that when you want to climb in any game like this, you want to tighten your range, not loosen it, not broaden it, right? You want to be playing fewer different comps, which seems a little counterintuitive to most people. You might ask, well, Swim, wouldn't you want to open yourself up to more options so that you can, maybe have a better game based on whatever you're going to find? And the problem with that right now is that loot streaking is very powerful. I love loot streaking, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And because of loot streaking, it gives you the ability to tighten your range even more, because you're going to get those free rerolls early that are going to help you force the comp you want. And also in this case, this composition, which is going to use 6 warriors, a lot of you guys have seen it around, but I'm going to talk about exactly how to pilot it, is going to do very well. It's just kind of the meta king, and it's very, very reliable. At the end of the day, the most important thing when you're trying to climb is just play 1 or 2 things, get good at those 1 or 2 things, and figure out a way to be able to force them. Make sure you're picking the things that are most consistent, and also maybe kind of skill based, so that you can kind of outmaneuver other players. Anyway, now that we understand why we're kind of only playing 1 comp for this climb, it's not just because I'm lazy and it's easy to do in a YouTube video, although I don't mind that. Basically, let's talk about the comp, and let's talk about why this works and why this is so good. So the end game composition is going to involve, there's 2 different variants, and we're going to talk about both of them. So the end game composition is going to involve 6 warriors. So the 6 warriors in question are going to be Doom, Pudge, Slardar, Tidehunter, Tiny or Kunkka, and Troll Warlord. Now the Tiny Kunkka slot is a little bit flexible. If you have a Tiny level 3, obviously the Tiny level 3 is good. I think a lot of people go for a Kunkka 2, and there's a lot of games where I actually will just keep a Tiny 2 on my board instead of a Kunkka 2. Kunkka 2 is a little bit stronger, but it's a lot more expensive, and sometimes I'll be wanting to use that gold for another couple of roll downs, see if I can 2-star something else. Because, I mean, you're paying a full 12 gold on top of this 3, so you're paying 9 gold for that upgrade. That's 4 rolls. I'm not sure that's always worth it. Depends on the situation. So basically, the rest of the comp, we can talk about that here. You're either going to be in 6 warrior, 4 warlock. The 4 warlocks, the core warlocks, that's going to be alchemist. It's going to be disruptor. It's going to be necrophos, and it's going to be witch doctor. That's going to give you heartless with necrophos and pudge. and Troll with Witch Doctor and Troll Warlord. And of course, Disruptor's ace ability with 4 Warlocks is very powerful. Okay, so that's one variant of the comp, 6 Warrior, 4 Warlock. And that's what you're going to want to do if you're getting Disruptors and Alchemists early, and you have a good board and a good economy such that you're getting lucky. You're probably going to be able to go to level 10. It's the greedier variant. If it's the luxury build. If you're having a good start and you're getting Alchemists and Disruptors, you want to go into 4 Warlocks. Otherwise, you can stay 2 Warlocks with Necrophos and Witch Doctor. These are the important ones because they pair Heartless and Troll if you have Troll Warlord. And on top of that, you are going to want a filler unit, which usually ends up being something like Arc Warden. Arc Warden being, of course, just a great unit. You should be picking these up as you see them. Now, if you're finding Arc Wardens early, if you find an item for Arc Warden, you're obviously going to want to put a great clonable item on Arc Warden. That's going to want to be a Maelstrom or a Basher. Ideally in the early game, and Daedalus is the king of Arc Warden items later. He wants these like attack, not attack speed items. He has such high attack speed, you want like plus damage or proc items. And Maelstrom, Skull Basher, and Daedalus are just kind of the 3 items you really want to be seeing on your Arc Warden. So if I'm getting like, if I have like a paired Arc Warden on round 20 and I hit like a Skull Basher, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is a game where I'm probably going to go the 2 Warlock Arc Warden build. Now, I will say the one major advantage of this variant, which is like 2 Warlock Arc Warden, is it's a level 9 build, right? I was talking about Warlocks. You want to be in the 4 Warlock version when you're getting a good game because you need level 10 to get it online, and you don't always have that luxury. If my game is a bit weaker, maybe I find a pair of Arc Wardens early, I'll be like, okay, let's just go the Arc Warden version. You know, we don't need anything else. And when the Arc Warden version is going to go to level 10, it's pretty simple. You just chuck in a second Arc Warden. Sometimes, usually a second Doom is going to be good as well when you get that build to level 10. But oftentimes you will just stay level 9, and that's fine. There's nothing terribly wrong with that if you're having like kind of a weaker game. That's totally fine. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, we really have to get out of the way the early game, mid-game timing and strategies. So I said I like loose streaking. What I will basically do with this build is I will loose streak almost every time early. So my loose streak will be from round 4 to round 9. I do this in almost every game. I think it's basically just an efficient way to play right now. There's a lot of Lords that do it as well. Although actually, you'll find a majority of top players are still win streaking early. So this is an opinion that I have. I really like the loose streak early. I think it's great. But basically what this is going to look like, round 4 through round 9, you're going to lose these rounds. And basically, that means you're going to take units off your board. You can leave a couple units on your board for these rounds so that, you know, you might be able to try to protect your health a little bit. Sometimes I'll like putting like a Bounty Hunter level 2 or a Lena level 1 on my board because they have abilities that can just kill a unit without, you know, winning the board. And I will intentionally weaken my board. So what you're going to want to do for this strategy, it's actually very, very important. You are going to need to go into your settings and turn off this option, auto deploy units from your bench if there is room. The setting will force you to run the amount of units that everyone else is running. When in reality, when you want to be loose streaking from round 4 to round 9, you are going to want to run less units than everyone else. So like, I'll press tab on round 4, I'll see, okay, everyone else is running 3 units, nobody else is trying to lose round 4, I'll just run 2 level 1 units, right? I will be completing the units that fit into my build, but I will be benching 2 stars. Again, loose streaking is just going to be very, very efficient early game. If you have a crazy situation, if you have like 3 2-stars super early, you can turn it into a win streak. And honestly, at lower rankings, win streaking is a little more easy to force. So if you have the ability to very reliably force a win streak instead of a lose streak, like if you lose 4 and 5, get those free rolls, and you hit crazy stuff, you can start maybe winning from 6 or 7. But round 8 and round 9 are both worth 2 gold on that lose streak, and that's very valuable, and I wouldn't break that for most things. So yeah, the lose streak is going to do wonders for your build. So let's talk about what you're actually scooping up early game. So you're often going to want to go into something like 3 warriors, 2 druids. That's going to be like how you win streak in the mid game, because even though you're lose streaking from round 4 through round 9, you want to start trying to win as hard as possible from round like not always 11, but maybe like 11 or 12, right? That's when you want to start winning. And you're going to want to win as hard as possible for basically the rest of the game. So, obviously, we're going to be playing for our interest points. We're going to be playing for our economy. And we're going to be picking up, like, basically any warrior we see. So I'll often have something like Tiny, Tusk, Slardar. If you can get a level 2 Slardar, that's incredible. Obviously Pudge is good. And I'll be looking at units like Enchantress, units like Venomancer maybe because they just rebuff Savages as well. And units like Tree and Protector. Also Furion, Nature's Prophet. These druids, like having a pair of druids with one of them being a leveled up is very powerful. And sometimes you can get both druids leveled up, and that's nuts when you do it. Obviously, we're going to sell out of these later, but we don't really need to now. Lycan is great for the option for 4 Savages, which again just got buffed, so you kind of have that option as well. And as we can see, there's just a lot of warriors. Like sometimes even a weaker warrior like Axe, when he gets to level 2, I'll be like, yeah, sure, let's put him in, right? So yeah, these are the units you're going to be picking in the first 3 rounds. The warriors, Enchantress, Tiny, Tusk, Enchantress are all kind of like top tier in the first 3 rounds. And sometimes, you know, running just like cheap, effective tier 1 level 2s, Anti-Mage, if it gets to level 2, that's great. Sometimes you run that with Nature's Prophet and Tree and get elusives that way. That's something you're going to want to watch out for. Bloodseeker with Helm, if you have a Helm, can be something like that. It's honestly not terrible. In general, I would not fall into the trap of trying to play for pairs of other units. Like, let's say we're on like round 4, I find like a pair of Witch Doctors or a pair of Lunas or Pucks. I'm not really gonna do anything about that, or Lunas. Units like that just aren't very useful early, I will just lose. And part of the reason that lose streaking is so good is because it allows me to do that, right? It allows me to look at kind of weaker pairs and be like, well, in a normal situation, if I wanted to win, I can play for that pair, I can try to complete it. But it's not really worth it. When the unit completes, it's not really super strong. And on top of that, it's going to cost me gold, not only the resell golds, because, you know, when it's a tier 2 unit, it costs you resell gold. Very different from tier 1 level 2s. But also on top of that, it's going to cost like interest points every turn it's on your board, potential interest points. And it's just not really worth it. It really isn't. So you're going to want to be hitting these interest points early. If I'm lose streaking, I usually hit my first interest point on round 6. And I stay on the interest point for a while. I'm not going to be leveling up until 13 or so. I basically don't press the level button until 13. But sometimes if I have a super winnable board and I'm like, if I win round 6, sometimes I'll take like a really weird level up there. Anyway, that's the early game. I'm spending so much time on this because early game is really, really important. And if you snowball properly, you're going to have an easy game. Okay, so make sure you focus on your early game as a player. One last thing I'd like to note, Witch Doctor, I actually mentioned it's part of the comp, but don't buy it early. I start buying Witch Doctors maybe on like rounds like 15 or so. And I'll get a Witch Doctor 2 at the end of the game. Another thing, part of the reason I don't buy Witch Doctors early, don't go for 3 stars of almost every unit except for maybe Doom and maybe Arc Warden. Like, for example, I'll never, well, okay, also Tiny. Tiny is another unit you 3-star. But I'll build like a 4th Tusk just because there's some weird situations where, you know, you'll get Tusk 5 and 6 and then you'll run 2 level 2 Tusks on your board for a little bit. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to take this unit to 3-star. I'm not going to care about that. And Pudge, I'll never 3-star. Witch Doctor, I'll never 3-star. It's just not worth it. You're playing for long odds, and it's not really a big upgrade. I also usually don't end up buying Juggernaut, because Juggernaut ends up being pretty expensive, hard to complete, and very, very expensive when he gets to that level 2. So it's really not worth it. But Doom, you know, I mean, you should just be clicking on every Doom you see, basically. And if he 3-stars, he 3-stars. I mean, that does happen sometimes, especially if you're in a weaker lobby. So now let's talk about level timings. So the timings of these rounds is going to be pretty important. Basically, what we're going to be doing is usually, you know, we'll lose streak through 9. And then on 10, we'll come out on the other side strong and start like putting our 2-stars on a board, win streaking harder. Around 15, we should be hitting maximum interest and also leveling to usually level 7 at that point if you've got a good economy. If you've lost from 4 to 9, hit the interest points aggressively that you should. I hit interest points very aggressively. I'll sell some stuff that just don't fall into the trap of like keeping a level 2 Bat Rider or something for an interest point. Just get the interest points you want and play for the units you want, right? Now at like 16, I'll be leveling to 7, and usually these days I will pre-level to 8 on 17, sometimes 8 on 18. And the reason for this is you just want to play for your higher level odds. It's going to be very, very important. And I'll explain why in a little bit. And we're going to, after that, we're going to level to 9 on 21. pre-level to 9 on 21. This is pretty aggressive. This is not how, you know, the meta kind of used to be played. But when you level to 9, and I'll throw up the level odds chart right here. When you level to 9 over 8, you increase your odds so much of hitting 4 costs and 5 cost units. Those being, you know, the big ones: Kunkka, Doom, Tidehunter, Troll Warlord in Legendary tier, a Warlock in Legendary, or Ace tier, I guess, as they're called. Our Disruptor, Necrophos, Alchemist, like all these big units. You want your level 9 odds for that, and you'll usually have another 2-star you can throw on your board to keep your board really strong as well. So 9 on 21 is basically a staple right now. If you've misplayed your economy a little bit, sometimes you'll be at like a bad economy on 21, and you'll think, maybe I'll go to 9 on 22. And sometimes you do that, but usually that is almost always the byproduct of like mismanaging your economy early rather than just getting unlucky. So if that happens, you can go 9 on 22, but think back and try to economy harder. So 9 on 21, and then the rest of the game is going to start from there. You play it out kind of like a normal game. You know, you're just rolling down for upgrades. I can show you a picture of what your completed board is going to look like. And basically, the idea is you're going to effectively want to have like this final board with like 9 or 10 units. You'll go to level 10, usually on round 31. 31 is like pretty standard timing for level 10 for some big final roll down on your level 10 odds. Okay, so we've covered all of that. Let's talk about kind of one more thing, which is why this is. And why this, so there's two kinds of builds on Underlords. There's like roll builds and level builds, right? It's very fundamental to the game. Roll builds are going to be looking for 3-star units. They stay at level 8 and they roll. That's like knights, assassins, you know, elusives, whatever. Stay at level 8 and roll. These builds are inconsistent. We're not going to want to do those because if someone else, like, not only do you not sometimes find what you're hitting, but we've all had that experience. Sometimes you're like, oh, I've got a good start. Let's go in this build on round 5. Let's tab to check to see if nobody else is in this build blocking us. Nope, we're all good. But then on round like 8, after we're in like elusives or whatever we're in, we see someone else is like chasing us onto it for no reason, right? We've all had that happen to us. It's horrible, and that's one of the downsides of these roll value builds. We gotta go for level builds. Level builds are going to level to 9 super early, 21 these days, but you know, in different metas it can be as late as 25. But yeah, they're gonna level to 9 early, and they're gonna play for 4 costs and 5 cost units and 2-star things rather than 3-starring things. So, for example, I mean, we can look at the tier list, and we see how many Warlocks and Warriors are in tier 4, right? Look at this. Alchemist, and well, of course, Arc Warden, which is neither, but it's a powerful unit that we use. Doom, Kunkka, Tidehunter, Necrophos. It's very, very stacked there, okay? So that's why this build exists in the way that it does. I'm also going to point out one more thing, very, very important. Because you want Troll Warlord, you have to be benching the pair of Trolls. So the way Ace units work is that as long as you own at least 2 Trolls, in this case, at least the completed tier of the Ace, you have to own it. You don't have to put it in board. That's a common misconception. You can have 1 on bench or 1 on board or 2 on bench. As long as you own 2 different Trolls, you will have improved odds of finding Troll Warlord. Now, the 2 Trolls you're going to want for that are, of course, Witch Doctor and Bat Rider. You can have Shadow Shaman as well. Shadow Shaman works, but if you have an Arc Warden, which you often will, then Shadow Shaman will increase your odds of finding Enigma, which will actually lower your odds of finding Troll Warlord, which is really what you want to be hitting, okay? So, at the end of the day, I'll often, like, you know, starting level 8, you know, starting around just like 17 or so, I will start benching like Bat Rider or Shadow Shaman and Witch Doctor, of course, which I'll, as I mentioned, I started benching by that point in the game, and that'll increase my odds for Troll. And when I go to 9 and my 8th tier odds go up to 3% per unit per pack, then suddenly I've got great odds at hitting that Troll Warlord. That just makes my board really good. I think the biggest weakness of this build is sometimes in the late game it doesn't hit Troll, but you're still going to be getting like 1st or 2nd place if you're playing it very cleanly. Okay, so that's basically it. You know, there's a lot I'd like to go into in like a much more advanced guide. We can talk about like specific positioning and a lot of other things, but this is all you need to get to Lord. So if you go out there, if you try the strategy, if you play, make sure you're focusing on the early game. Make sure you're lose streaking 4 to 9. Make sure you are win streaking in the mid game. Play aggressively for this mid streak a little bit if you have to, but don't burn through your economy. And just just make sure that you're doing basically this build. I would do this every time. I mean, this is personally what I use to climb. I do almost exclusively this, and it works very well for me. I've got a very good win rate in the last like 2 weeks since I started using this build again. We climbed from Lord like 700 to Lord 100. We actually just dropped out of 100. You know, what are you gonna do? All right, guys, that's it. That's the build. I really think this next week is a good time to be jamming this build. If you don't hit Lord in this next week, you might miss your chance for Season 0. It's possible, because the meta is going to shift, things are going to be very different. Who knows? Maybe there won't be another easy time to force an honestly overpowered build and get that easy Lord of White Spire. Alright guys, that's going to be it, and I'll see you guys next time.